Jeremy, thank you so much for being on the show today. Introduce yourself to everybody.
Well, my name is Dr. Jeremy Butler. I like to consider myself a safety culture advocate. So my life's journey and passions has always been self defense and martial arts. I really believe it's a life skill that everyone should embrace. I've been training martial arts since I was about 12 years old. And it's really become core to everything that I do, from my career path to just my hobbies. It's truly my passion.
Very cool. I like that you think that everybody should know how to defend themselves. And doing what I do, I am surprised by the amount of people who just either think a police officer is magically going to appear or that their personal safety isn't their own responsibility. So I'm glad to see that you are out there also telling people it's good to defend yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's so critical, and sometimes it gets me in situations where it's like the passion comes on a little too strong. Where I'll come across people and they're and they're like, "Oh yeah, I don't really do that. That's not my thing." And it's like, personal safety isn't your thing. Like, what do you mean? So yeah, it definitely can get to me sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's going to be your thing at some point in your life, and you better be ready for it, right?
Absolutely.
Cool. So tell us about your career, your studies, and what really drives you to help people.
There's a lot to that. So in terms of career, we can break that down into sort of two domains. So there's the civilian side where I teach self-defense workshops and martial arts courses to a variety of different organizations, corporate teams, schools, universities, things of that nature. And then there's my law enforcement side. So I spent about 7 years in law enforcement from 2013 to 2020. And I earned my PhD that year, the year of COVID, is when I finished my doctorate. And I transitioned out of law enforcement and into more of a role of academia research. And my whole goal has always been to be both a practitioner as well as a scholar.
Mhm.
So I'm actually a police academy instructor now. So I developed the control tactics curriculum for one of the academies in Illinois, and I train police recruits once a week in defensive tactics and control and arrest tactics. So you have those two areas, and then there is my day job. I work for a university. I teach courses at the university, and then I also run a program called Project Flex, where I'm working with youth who are incarcerated. So it's a youth development program. The idea is to teach life skills to incarcerated youth through sport, with hopes to reduce the recidivism rates for these kids. Recidivism being them going back to prison after they have been released. So I'm sort of I have my hat in, or my hands in a bunch of different domains or a bunch of different areas. But ultimately, when it comes to the personal safety piece, regardless to who I'm working with, my ultimate goal is really translating lessons from real situations that I've faced in my life or things that I've witnessed, and putting them into practical lessons that anyone can learn from. So I was born and raised on the south side of Chicago. I saw a lot growing up. I experienced a lot of situations, and that's what really drove my passion for martial arts. And now I just try to give that back in as many ways as I can to a variety of different communities.
And I appreciate that you have, picked up this banner and run with it. Not only are you teaching civilians to protect themselves, you're teaching police officers, and then you're also offering life skills to, people who are incarcerated who absolutely need it when they get out, man. So like my hat's off to you. That's awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So what do you think is some of the best ways that the average person can protect themselves?
Making personal safety education like a part of your life is really the starting point, right? So finding what excites you the most. So that could be you choosing to learn weapons, learn like
Mhm.
firearms, safety, firearms training. That could be martial arts and self defense training. So going to a local martial arts school that values self defense, because the one thing about martial arts, it comes in a variety of different forms. So there are some styles that really are more about personal development, character development. There are styles that are more about sport. And then you have the styles that are self defense focused. And I'm even hesitant to say styles because even within one style of martial arts, your focus could be different depending on the instructor. But my point being, if we're talking about personal protection, wherever you find yourself, you want to make sure that that is the value system of that instructor at that location. So again, we have firearms as one option that many people embrace when it comes to learning to protect themselves. There's the martial arts and self-defense training, and then there's the more holistic approach. So this could be safety measures like home security systems, like thinking more broadly, having cameras in your home, reading books on personal safety, or listening to the Secure Family podcast, right? And those more broader overall personal and public safety strategies and methods and tactics. And so my opinion is that, and my recommendation is that you invest in all three of these areas.
Mhm.
And then you find that point of focus that you enjoy the most. Because for some people, realistically, for example, if they say they want to do firearms, but I often teach in my self defense workshops, you don't want to own a firearm if you're afraid of it. If
Absolutely.
you're not comfortable with using it because you're not training with it. If you're not comfortable with the idea that you might actually have to pull that trigger if your life depended on it, then maybe a firearm isn't for you. Maybe you want to find a different means of personal protection. So to me, it's like for each of those 3 areas and having each of those 3 areas in your toolbox, but then you find what your point of focus is, what truly works for you in that exploration.
Yeah, I like that because you're saying to people like, yeah, you're gonna have to get out of your comfort zone some to do this sort of thing. But if there is, something that you were just deathly afraid of, like a firearm, that sort of thing, and that's a great example, then they're not gonna retain that information. They're not gonna want to do it. And, so that's why I think, finding the thing that ignites you inside to want to protect yourself and how you want to do that is a really valuable thing. Do you see any sort of value in watching these violent encounters on social media? Is there something we can learn from this, or is it all just it is what it is?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I actually recently published a book called Built to Survive. And in chapter 3 of that book, it's literally all about studying violence. I'm a
Mhm,
huge proponent of that, right? So now one thing I would caution people is to like while you should like while I think studying violence, studying videos and things of that nature are important, you want to be cognizant of your mental health as well.
mhm,
So if some videos might be triggering for you, and if that's too much, then maybe you take a step back. But there's so much that can be learned from the experiences of others, right? And there's a lot of research that even backs this ideology of observational learning, right? You can learn through watching other people and through their experiences. You don't actually always have to go through it yourself. Especially in situations like that, you can study and analyze video and say, okay, what would I do in that situation? Or
mhm,
look at what mistakes were made, right? So there's a lot of value in that debriefing. As a matter of fact, both at the police academy I teach at and when I was in law enforcement, I strongly encourage that with the other officers. It's like we should be using these video. We have hours and hours and hours of dash cam footage and body cam footage. Why not take that information and during a debrief, during roll call, for the sake of example, talk about it?
mhm.
Tactics that were used, areas of strengths, areas of improvement. So yeah, I'm really big on it. And as a matter of fact, for me growing up, I literally studied violence directly. Now I don't
Mhm.
recommend this
Sure.
for the everyday person, but I mean I just grew up in this environment where fights were very common. So I would stop and watch. And again, this is not what I'm recommending for people. If when things go down, I recommend you get out of there. But for me, when I was teenager years, I mean, it was my studies. Like I would watch the fights go down and say, okay, how would I handle that situation if I was in that moment? What would I do? What wouldn't I do? Things of that nature. And it helped me a lot. But fortunately, with modern day, since we have access to social media, we have access to YouTube and videos, you can literally search those things up. If you're concerned about how to do something, you can look into those areas and analyze them.
No, I agree, and, I appreciate that you gave the warning about mental health because there's sometimes, like, at, I don't know, past 8 o'clock at night, it's just, I don't wanna see this anymore. I don't wanna watch any more violent videos or whatever, but what I have done is I've seen certain elements in videos, and I will see it over and over again, like, kind of like the pre-event indicator that somebody's about to strike, what was that moment that that person shifted to, we may fight here, to we are fighting and I'm throwing the first punch. Maybe it's just a shift in weight, it's backing off a little bit or getting closer, that sort of thing. So yeah, it's like we as humans, we sometimes exhibit the same sort of patterns, and we have all this video out here. We might as well be looking at it to try to find those patterns, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
So, nobody really wants to think about being in a violent encounter. So, if somebody gets attacked, what are some of the self defense concepts that every person needs to be familiar with?
To answer that, I would rewind and ask what happened before that person is attacked. So a big concept that I teach is called practicing the arts, and that's an acronym ARTS, practicing the arts. So the A is avoid, R is run, T is talk, S is strike. Right.
Mm,
So to me, self defense starts with avoidance. Right. So you remove the opportunity for violence to occur with awareness of your surroundings, right? So you're picking up on the body language of people. You're picking up on your intuition, right? Where your
mhm.
body is telling you something is wrong. You have to listen to listen to those things and act in those moments. So avoidance is first and foremost. Then comes the R, the run, right? So if it's too late to avoid, the person is already coming up on you. If you have an opportunity to remove yourself from that situation completely, you get out of there, right? So running is, it could be literally running, or it could just be literally finding a way to remove yourself from the situation before the violence occurs. So I always start with those two because oftentimes that's forgotten, and then we just go straight to the fighting. And then there's a third. So the T is talk, right? So
Mhm.
using the power of words to de-escalate when you can't run. And with talking comes distance management, right? So a simple concept in my eyes is you don't allow people into your personal space. So if you feel like someone is going to attack you and they're stepping to you, you want to be creating space between yourself and that person, and you want to be using the power of words. I've heard some people refer to it as preparing your witnesses, right? So you want to be saying, hey, stay back, I need my space, I need you to stop.
Mhm.
You start making noise, make like asserting that will to that to expressing that you're willing to fight if you have to, but not in a way that you're being the aggressor, but in a way that it's like, hey, I need my space, I need you to step back, I don't want to hurt you, I don't want to fight. But your hands are up, your palms are out, in a non-threatening manner, and you're asserting that dominance, right? So yeah, that's the T. And then we get to your question: if you're attacked, right? The strike comes at the end in my eyes, right? So um, you use whatever violence is necessary to survive in that situation. So I've
Mhm.
tried to avoid it. The avoidance did not work. I tried to run. There's nowhere for me to run in that moment. I'm trying to talk the person down. It's not working. Now is the point where when we get to the S, the strike. And it could be literally a strike. It could be gaining control of the person. Strike could be drawing a weapon if you have any of those elements. But strike is that actual part where you're physically acting.
There's something I want to follow up on because you made a great point in there. And you said that you were preparing your witnesses. Kind of explain a little bit more about that concept.
Sure. So preparing your witnesses, that idea is that you want people to be nosy, right? So if you're, and this is assuming that you're out in public where you're in an
Right.
environment where people can hear you. But if someone is trying to offer violence toward me, I want everybody that's around to know that a confrontation may go down,
Mhm.
because they are going to be potential witnesses. They are going to be either people that can help, although I would not rely on that,
Right.
right? Be your own
True.
first responder, but people that can help, people that can record the encounter, which is more likely to happen than helping, is people just pull out their phones and record. But that
Mhm.
can be used to your advantage, right? Or people that can call 911 for you and get the police there. And you want them to be witnesses. And so when they're explaining what occurred, like if you're just are really aggressive toward a person and you're meeting aggression with aggression, it's hard to tell who initiated the encounter at the end.
Mhm.
When it's all said and done, it's hard to tell who initiated. But for me, preparing your witnesses, like I have my hands up, my palms out. I'm like, stay back. I don't want to fight you. And people are hearing these words. I don't know you. If it's a child, it's really good. Like, I don't know you. You're not my parent. Things like that. That's preparing your witnesses. Now people are hearing, okay, what's going on over here? If all they saw, if all they did was heard and they didn't see anything, what did they hear you say? And that can make a big difference in court later if you have to defend your actions.
Absolutely. I agree with all of that. When you meet aggression with aggression, it's hard to tell who the bad guy was and who initiated and all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, great points there. I do have a question, and this is an interesting one that a lot of people make assumptions about. But in self-defense, does the bad guy always have to strike first, or is there a case where the victim can strike first?
Okay, so first to that question, I typically tell people research the use of force laws in your area, right? For details behind that. But in general, yes, you have the right to defend yourself. You do not have to wait for a person to hit you in order for you to defend yourself. And striking first is often necessary, right? Because if you wait, action is faster than reaction, right? So
Mhm.
if you stand there and you're waiting for the person to hit you, right? That one shot could knock you unconscious. That one shot could do way more damage than you expect, and you're assuming that you'll be able to block it, right? So
Mhm.
I recommend distance management, right? So that the person is so that you make it difficult to do so. But really, to me, striking first is it's necessary in many cases. When you don't have an avenue for escape, like I said, running through that acronym of the arts, when I don't have an avenue for escape and I see these indicators that a person is probably going to attack me, then yes, I do think that's a moment when it's appropriate for you to strike before that person strikes. And I'll give you three major indicators. So one is closing the distance. So as I said before, you never want to let a potential threat enter your personal space. So if someone is closing the distance, whether you know them or not, in many cases, people assume, the mental picture is automatically this stranger lurking in the bushes or this unknown person. It could be someone that you know that something tells you they have ill intent, or they have an indicator of ill intent. So someone's closing the distance and you don't feel right about that. They're entering your personal space. That's a cue that you're probably going to get attacked. You should act in some capacity. Two, and in that case, acting could be you creating more space between yourself and that person if you don't feel quite ready to strike in that moment. But number two is a shift in body weight. So you mentioned this
Mhm.
before. So an example of a shift in body weight could be this person is stepping into your space. You're like, hey, I need you to stay back. And then you suddenly see them take a step back, usually with their dominant side. So most people are right-handed. So they take a step back with their right leg. That's a cue that they're probably going to come back forward with a right hook, right overhand. They're going to hit you with that shot. And then I'll add a little brief story with that. As a matter of fact, no, let me give you the third one, then I'll share a story about
Okay.
this exact same thing. All right. So one is closing the distance. That's the first indicator. Two is the shift in body weight. So they take a step back. And then three is that you always want to watch the hands. Right.
Mhm.
So a closed fist is generally going to be a precursor that they're going to strike you. Right. Also, when hands disappear, that's a major concern because when hands disappear, weapons tend to come out.
Mm.
So
Mhm.
you want to watch the hands. So those are three major ones: closing up the distance, shifting in body weight, like they take a step back to swing, and then you watch their hands. Are the hands disappearing? Are they clenched fists? Those are moments where if I see those things happening, there's a good chance if I don't have room to create space, I'm gonna move forward. I'm gonna strike. And I'll give you a quick little anecdote on that. And again, I share this story in the book. When I was in high school, I was at this train terminal. Um, if you know Chicago, if any listeners are from Chicago, the Red Line on 95th Street, and my high school had a rivalry with another high school,
Mhm.
and so oftentimes at this terminal, fights would occur. And in many cases, it was based on what you were wearing. If you were wearing a certain
Mm.
color, You we knew that you were associated with this high school. If you were in a different, you were associated with that high school. So I'm standing next. I never was in the gang life or anything like that. I wasn't really a part of any of that. But I'm just environmentally I'm there. And so
Sure.
I'm standing next to this guy. We're waiting on a bus, and he's clearly from the rival area. And so, I'm kind of looking at him, but I'm good. He's giving me his space. He doesn't seem like he wants any problem. I don't want any problem. But then there's like three guys that walk up and they look at me and then they look at him. And then you see all of these three elements happen pretty much all at once. You saw closing at a distance. Got multiple guys walking up to us. The main guy that was in the middle, he took a step back with his right leg. And here's another indicator, by the way. He looked down and away, like looked over his
Mm,
shoulder. And then next thing you know, he turned back, clenched his fist, turned back, and punched the guy next to me right in the face. And then they started jumping the guy, stomping him out. And I just stepped back, kind of in shock about the whole situation. And I got out of there. I walked home. But that's an example of all of those things sort of happening. And in many cases, it happens really rapidly, right? And all of that was level of violence was really literally based on what this guy happened to be wearing in that moment in time, indicating that he was from that rival school. But point is, for your listeners, it may not necessarily be that. Many of you all may not be in an environment that I grew up in, but a major point I want you to get from it is those indicators. Some people might just choose you. They choose
mhm.
violence, and they see you, and they see whatever they perceive as some type sort of weakness or an easy target, and they choose to take that path. So just something to keep in mind.
Right. That leads me to something that I see a lot, and I'm sure you see this a lot when you are talking with people who self defense is a new concept. A lot of people will say, "Oh, but I'm a good person. Who would want to attack me?" And like you just said, it could be your clothes, it could be anything that you're just not aware of. So when somebody says, "Hey, I'm a good person. Who would ever want to attack me?" What's your response to that?
It's funny that you say that because I hear that so often. And I think you just kind of pointed it out. It's like that is me. That is a predator's dream. That is
Mm,
that is the perfect person for someone who's looking for someone to target, who believes I'm a good person. No one, because that's what they're looking for. They're looking for people who don't necessarily have that spirit or willingness or awareness that violence can happen to them, right? And so in many cases, having this sort of mindset or this perspective it's gonna put you behind the wall when it comes to personal protection, because now in the moment that the violence is occurring, you have to realize you're gonna have this cognitive overload where you're like, man, I can't believe this is happening to me, because you had this belief system. And while you're wrestling with that whole mental struggle, the act of violence is occurring. So you're already behind on that step. So yeah, so to people that say that, I would just say I really strongly encourage reevaluating your perspective on that and understanding that while you may be a good person, we live in a world where there aren't necessarily good people, and there are some good, and there are many people who are bad, or
mhm,
who exhibit those type of behaviors where it's like they are opportunists. And
mhm.
if you give me an opportunity to take advantage of you and you allow that, then they will.
Yeah. Great response to that. Yeah. People are just looking for the opportunity. And if they have a violent mindset, that's all they're gonna go for. It has nothing to do with you really. So for the parents who are listening, if I am as a parent involved in some sort of violent encounter in public that I didn't start or whatever, how do I need to be cognizant to protect my children who were with me in that encounter?
Okay, so I think that comes down to discussing these situations in advance, right? Um, So even right now, for people who are listening, after you finish listening to this podcast, have those. If you're a parent, have those discussions with your kids if they're of that age, where you can have those discussions and establishing a game plan for if something like that were to happen. I think that's really important. Not to wait until you're in the situation to try to address it. And so to me, if a child is old enough to understand that, they're old enough to run, then if violence is going to go down, they should probably try to get away, right? And you're acting as that shield between yourself and that child. If there's nowhere to run, or they're not willing to run or not able to run, if they're mobile in any way, I generally recommend they get behind the parent and remain in contact with them in some capacity. For
Okay.
example, it could just be the hand on the small of the back, whatever. So I know I could feel that the person I'm protecting is behind me without me having to turn and look. And then I can work my way to an exit. And then they need to be mobile as well. And this is a game that I encourage. This can be a fun game, even for families, where you practice this at home, where you literally have, let's say, mother, father, child. You have the child behind the mother or the father, and then the one person is trying to get to the child, and the child needs to move with the parent. So it can even be a fun family game that kind of brings up this self-defense topic. But everybody needs to be mobile. That contact needs to be made, so I know that my child is with me at all times. And obviously, you want to be working toward an exit, working toward creating as much space as you can between yourself and that person. Now, if the child is not mobile, like if it's like an infant that you're carrying, then in that case, I mean, it's a tough situation.
Hmm.
But the objective really needs to be getting that child and getting out of there, right? We're going straight to the escape option. But yeah, that's a tough situation if the child is not mobile.
Right. Yeah, no, man, I get it. And I think, age is dependent as well because you're going to tell, a 14-year-old differently from a 4-year-old, that sort of thing. So, yeah, have the
Mhm.
conversations. Like Jeremy has said, like when you were done listening to this episode, figure out how you want that conversation to go, how you want it to look, and then have this with your family so that it's not something that just seemingly happens out of the blue because that's not what any of us want. So, what do you wish more families knew about self defense?
So self-defense is a mindset. I'll give you an example even from my life. So my daughter, relatively recently, within the last couple weeks, my daughter asked me, "What would you do if someone tried to kidnap me?"
Hmm.
And so my response is that, and my daughter trains martial arts with me, and we have a lot of conversations surrounding safety and scenarios. And I encourage these sort of things where we talk through these different things. And so I flipped it on her and I asked, "What would you do if someone tried to kidnap you?" Right?
Uh-huh.
And so again, it comes down to this mindset. It's about understanding that you are your first responder, right?
Mhm.
And families should establish a culture and value system around discussing personal safety, but discussing what actions you can take, right? So I let her know, yeah, I'm always here to protect you if I'm there. If I'm
Mhm.
there, I absolutely am there to protect you, but you have to understand that I will not always be there. And I am trying to develop in her, and I'm saying this to her, I'm trying to develop in you that will and that spirit that says, I have a game plan. What would I do if this were the situation? Right? So this is how I think people should think, right? Like rather than thinking of having some type of person to come save you, think what do I have at my disposal? What options do I have? What can I do to keep myself safe? And that includes taking advantage of the resources that you should, like calling 911, for example. Those things are present, but you have to understand that there's, for example, if police are called, there's always going to be some type of delay,
Mhm.
right,
Right, right.
between them getting there and you're in the middle of the situation, right? So it's that mindset of what can you do, what will you do, what would you do in these situations, and if you have no answer to that, then there's something to explore. There's something for you to sort of a path to go on how do I get the answer to this question? What would I do? How do I handle this?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. What do you think is a dangerous myth in self-defense that needs to be corrected?
When I think about that, the most common one, first of all, I have a free download on this on my shameless plug here on my website, www.jeremybutlerphd.com. I have a download on multiple dangerous myths about self-defense. If anybody's interested in that, the biggest one that I think about is what we talked about earlier. If you're it's assuming that because you're a good person, violence won't happen to you. But I'll give you a different one since we talked about that. Another one that I see, and this is I really want to talk to the men the male listeners, because I see this most with guys. And that is the idea that, oh, I don't need any training. I can handle myself.
Mhm.
And the reality is that, most people vastly overestimate their abilities when it comes to self defense, right? So, unless you train, or unless you've lived a life, or if you've been exposed to a lot of violence, you've been in a lot of violent encounters, there's a good chance that you're mistaken if you believe, oh yeah, I'm good on this. I know how to defend myself. If you have no experiences to draw from as evidence of that, or very minimal experiences as evidence of that, and then also with that idea is, what is self defense?
Mhm.
So, and many times people automatically assume we're dealing with situations involving like social aggression, where it's like, oh, this guy says something to me, I say something back to him, we start shoving, we start fighting. But self defense is so much more than just those, social situations, right? We have to consider the reality of violence, right? So,
Mm.
self defense could be a situation where by the time you find out anything has happened, you've already been stabbed or shot or
Right.
whatever it is. It's not just this agreement, this mutual agreement between two guys, and we bump fists and then we agree to fight, right? There's no rules in many of these situations. So the mental picture that people have about self-defense is often mistaken, and that gives them this false sense of confidence in their abilities.
Yeah. No, man, I am right there with you. The first time I ever stepped on the mat to do self defense, I got humbled really quick, which is what my instructor wanted to do. He wanted to humble me. He's like, okay, so now you know the reality. Now we're going to build you up, and we're going to work on this. But yeah, man, there's a lot of people who were like, oh, I got in a fight in middle school and I won, so I'll still be able to defend myself at age 35 in Walmart parking lot with a tweaker. Right? Sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, man, that's the male ego. I get it. You get it. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's awesome, man. Jeremy, I
Exactly.
appreciate you being on this show so much and talking with you today. Where can people find out more about you and your book?
I'd say the simplest way to find out is www.jeremybutlerphd.com. This has all of my resources, including some free resources if you're interested in it, as well as the link to my book. The book is called Built to Survive: Self Defense Lessons from the South Side. It's literally lots of different stories about my life growing up on the South Side of Chicago, and then self defense lessons that can be learned from those experiences. So www.jeremybutlerphd.com is where you can find any and everything about me if you're interested in workshops or just getting a book or some of my free resources.
Thanks, man. I appreciate this. I appreciate what you're doing because you're putting your feet into the arena. You're not just sitting back and writing a book and hoping that people are going to read it. You're actually out there helping people every day. And honestly, that's what we all need more of.
Thank you. I appreciate that.